Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Our mission here is pretty simple. We take these complex, really dense sources, and we try to pull out the critical knowledge for you.
And serve it up in a way that's, actually digestible.
Exactly. And today, we are doing a fascinating piece of, I guess you could call it corporate archaeology. We are digging into the PennHost Group's Fitness for Work Safety Standard.
And this document is something else.
It really is. The official title is RSKPNA GLB STD 18 version 5 2025. But it's not just some regulatory checklist. It feels more like a full blueprint for managing human performance in really high-risk environments. I mean, its core purpose is to set up these systems to identify, evaluate, and manage all the risks that come with what they call reduced fitness.
And that's the key term, reduced fitness.
Right, and it's all about preventing fatalities, preventing asset damage. And this applies to, well, everyone on site, employees, contractors, subcontractors, even visitors.
Yeah, and what immediately grabs you is just how broad that definition of reduced fitness is.
Yeah.
You might think, okay, this is about alcohol and drugs.
That's what I thought at first.
Right. But it's so much more. It's a whole systemic, risk-based approach. It addresses everything from physical impairment, a medical condition, to emotional stress, fatigue, psychological stress.
The whole human condition, basically.
It's a mandatory playbook for managing the human condition in a place where one mistake can be catastrophic.
Yeah.
But they are very clear about what it doesn't cover.
Yeah.
Things like, say, long-term exposure to dust or noise, any kind of chronic occupational health stuff, that's all handled by separate standards. This is zeroed in entirely on the operational readiness of the person right here, right now.
Which makes it so much more than a rule book. It's like a form of corporate governance over a person's physical and mental state. They're legislating everything from your body clock to your stress levels.
They really are.
Okay, let's unpack this. We should probably start with the foundation, right? The risk registers.
Absolutely. The risk registers are basically the starting gun for the whole system. They have to systematically identify two key areas that are interconnected.
And the first is?
The first is the list of safety-critical activities. So these are tasks that are so crucial that if something goes wrong, it's likely to result in a permanent disabling injury or a fatality.
Can you give us a few examples from that list?
Yeah.
Because seeing them really paints a picture of what's at stake.
Of course. I mean, think about the highest impact situations you can imagine in, say, a mining environment. You've got working at heights, operating huge mobile equipment haul trucks, excavators.
With big stuff.
The really big stuff. Heavy lifting, interacting with the moving parts of equipment. But it also includes things that need high cognitive function, isolating hazardous energy sources, complex electrical work, managing geotechnical risks.
The stability of the ground itself.
Exactly. So once you've defined those activities, the second area the registers have to identify is the safety critical roles.
Okay, so the people doing those activities.
Precisely. Any role where reduced fitness, and that could be from stress, fatigue, anything, could compromise that person's ability to do their job safely.
And this is where that whole emotional and psychological side becomes, well, non-negotiable.
Yes.
If you're operating that massive haul truck, the standard is explicitly linking, say, crippling emotional stress you're having at home with your ability to safely do your job. It's not about whether you feel okay anymore. It's about whether you're demonstrably fit for that critical task.
That's it, exactly. And this isn't some theoretical exercise. The standard demands that the controls you develop from these risks have to be documented in procedures. And those procedures have to be accessible to anyone who might have to manage one of these situations.
So the clear playbook?
A very clear playbook for how to manage that person to optimize their chance of safely getting back to being fit for work.
So we've got the framework. We know who and what is critical. But this is where the rubber really meets the road. In Section 2, the work method. This is where it gets really granular.
Yeah. It shifts the focus away from just the individual's choices and onto the company's control over the work environment itself.
Let's start with fatigue. That seems to be a huge part of this.
It is. A documented fatigue management system is mandatory. And it doesn't just look at hours worked. It has to assess rosters to make sure there's enough opportunity for sleep and recovery between shifts.
And I found that part incredibly detailed. The assessment of recovery time has to account for travel time, eating, personal care.
Even social activities.
Right, social activities.
Yeah.
They're trying to account for the entire 24-hour cycle of an employee, not just the 10 or 12 hours they're on site.
That's the key insight here. They recognize that sleep debt builds up off shift. That's why the system has to set maximum permissible hours of work, not just for a day, but for a week, and even across a 3-month period. It's trying to stop that cumulative fatigue.
The silent killer.
Exactly.
I have to pause on this for a second because some of these requirements, they start to feel like a significant intrusion into private life. How can a company realistically manage, and I'm quoting here, a person's engaging in demanding extracurricular activities outside of work?
It's a huge challenge.
I mean, what's the mechanism for that?
Well, the standard doesn't necessarily demand direct surveillance. It's not like they're putting a tracker on you, but it demands they have a method for managing it.
So what would that look like?
It might be something like a mandatory reporting requirement. You have to declare if you're flying long haul during your off-roster time, or if you're competing in some multi-day ultramarathon that might compromise you when you come back to work. It's about creating awareness.
Awareness that your personal choices have professional safety consequences here.
Right. And tying into that, the system also puts controls on the body's own clock. They require methods to control safety-critical activity when circadian rhythms are most likely to cause sleepiness.
That's fascinating. So you're saying, for example, that really high-precision work might be restricted between, say, 2 a.m. and 5 a.m., no matter how rested the person says they feel.
Exactly. It's a recognition of biology. It even extends to technology, mandating methods to reduce and manage the extended usage of mobile electronic devices.
Because of the distraction.
The sustained distraction. It inhibits your mental readiness. They are basically treating an employee's mental and physical state as a critical asset that has to be protected, sometimes even from the employee's own habits.
Wow. And then, just briefly, they also cover environmental things, right, like heat and cold.
Yes, thermal stress. Systems must be in place to prevent reduced fitness from that. It's not just about, having AC. It means assessing exposures, identifying people with symptoms, providing the right PPE, and making sure there's water, and crucially, documented recovery periods.
Okay, so they prevent impairment through scheduling and managing the environment. Let's move to Section 3, the more direct measures, the screening and the medicals.
Right. And this section links straight back to that core definition of fitness for work, a state where you haven't lost awareness, concentration, balance, or coordination. The systems have to catch that before it becomes an incident.
And the most obvious one is alcohol and drugs.
Yep. The testing for that is non-negotiable for anyone in a safety-critical role. The system has to include 5 types of testing.
5.
5. There's voluntary testing, random testing, post-incident, for cause. So if your behavior is erratic, and testing as part of a return-to-work program.
The inclusion of voluntary testing seems important. It feels less punitive, more like it's encouraging people to self-report and get help.
It absolutely shifts the culture. But beyond the immediate substance checks, there's a huge emphasis on underlying health. Section 4.4.1 mandates that people in these critical roles have to undergo rigorous health assessments.
Pre-placement periodically.
Yes. And the results aren't just filed away. They're checked against very specific acceptability criteria for that particular role.
So if a role requires you to, stand for 12 hours on uneven ground, the medical has to specifically verify you can do that. It's a functional check.
Precisely. And if you want to see how fast these standards adapt, just look at the section they included on COVID-19 management.
Right.
It outlines this whole system for restricting entry to sites to manage transmission risk.
And the requirements are pretty strict. It mandates verification of full COVID-19 vaccination before you can even enter a controlled site. And they even define fully vaccinated.
You do. It's not just 2 doses. It's making sure the time since your last dose is less than whatever the recommended period is for a booster.
That's specific.
And it perfectly illustrates where the company draws the line on responsibility. If you're unvaccinated, you can't enter unless you do a quarantine period and get a negative test. But the standard says the company only pays for that quarantine if you have a genuine documented medical reason.
In other words, if it's a personal choice for non-medical reasons, the cost of meeting the site entry requirements is on you. That's a very clear line in the sand.
A very clear line.
Okay, so we know how they identify risk, control the schedule, and test for impairment. Let's get into Section 4, the management and support system. What happens when they actually identify someone with reduced fitness?
The standard is very clear on this. A mandatory system has to be in place to support people in these roles who report a condition that might compromise them. And that support has many facets.
Like what?
It can include referral to an employee assistance program, or EAP. It could be paid or unpaid leave, a temporary change to their duties or their roster, or even developing an individual rehabilitation program.
The administrative burden there sounds massive. It's not just a referral, it's active case management.
It absolutely is, which leads directly into the training requirements. Section 4.4.2 says the people managing these situations have to be highly trained and competent.
And not just in the technical stuff.
No. They need skills in interpreting test results. Sure, alcohol, drugs, hydration, medicals, but also in the softer skills. Counseling, evaluating the whole situation, and then actually designing and implementing these rehab plans.
So they're not just managers, they're industrial case managers. They have to navigate the medical data and the human emotional side.
Exactly. And the rigor extends beyond people, right down to the tools. Section 4.3 dictates really stringent control over the equipment used for assessment, like breathalyzers.
What kind of control?
They have to be received from the supplier with documented calibration evidence.
That detail is a brilliant insight into how seriously they take this data.
Yeah.
I mean, if the breathalyzer is off, the whole decision is compromised.
The whole system falls apart. And the process for inspecting and servicing that equipment is dictated not just by the manufacturer, but by how often it's used, the environment it's in, and most importantly, the consequence of the equipment failing.
Wow. So if a faulty device could lead to someone being incorrectly cleared for a critical job, the inspection frequency has to be way higher.
Exponentially higher. It's this closed loop of risk mitigation. From the deep psychological stress of worker all the way down to the calibration certificate for the device measuring their breath. And then finally, the standard recognizes that knowledge is maybe the ultimate control. All personnel have to periodically get risk-based hazard awareness information.
Show training.
Constant training on the effects of drugs and alcohol, practical stress management techniques, how to manage fatigue, diet, exercise, thermal stress, and critically detailed info on how to access that employee assistance program.
So to sum it up, we've taken this incredibly detailed corporate standard, and what we found is a systematic effort to govern employee capability across mental, emotional, and physical dimensions. It's a total system.
It really is designed to leave nothing to chance.
So what does this all really mean?
Well, I think for you, the listener, the sheer complexity of this document reveals how many different factors are now considered safety critical in these high-risk industries. The organization sees an employee's readiness as a complex system that needs constant maintenance.
It's not just a person showing up for a shift.
No. Everything from what you do on your night off to the procedural control over your own body clock. It's all mandated to mitigate the risk of a catastrophe. It's a remarkable achievement in comprehensive safety.
But it does come at a cost.
And that raises a really important question for you to think about. Given this emphasis on managing things like psychological stress, on controlling your leave balances, on dictating shift length, this standard views the employee almost entirely as a controllable risk variable.
A component in the machine.
In a way, yes. So when rigorous safety demands such extensive documented control over your personal health choices and your time outside of shifts, where do the boundaries of corporate responsibility and individual privacy, where do they start to blur? You may want to mull over how a comprehensive system like this really affects employee autonomy in the modern workplace.
A profound point to finish on. That's all the time we have for this deep dive into the Panos Fitness for Work Safety Standard. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll catch you next time.